Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human researched and written material.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to dig into this material with you.
Yeah, I'm thrilled you're here because, well, imagine for a second if every single rationalization you made today, every hidden motive you harbored or like every secret envy you felt was suddenly just printed on a massive billboard for the entire world to see.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds like an absolute nightmare.
Right. I mean, no PR spin, no context at all, just the raw, completely unvarnished truth of exactly why you do what you do. It's terrifying. But today, we're doing a deep dive into an ancient text that claims this isn't just some nightmare scenario. It's actually the ultimate unavoidable reality of the universe.
It really is. And we're going to be looking closely at chapters 50 through 56 of the Qur'an, which, for those of you who study this text regularly, you already know we are dealing with some of the most philosophically dense and honestly poetic sections available.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking at chapters like Qaf, the Scatterers, the Mountain, the Moon, the Beneficent, and the Great Event. And our mission for this deep dive is to really push past those surface-level translations, right? We want to utilize the historical commentaries and pull out the practical wisdom hidden in these verses.
Exactly. We're exploring things like radical accountability, the interconnectedness of ecology and spirituality, and really the inescapable destination of human action.
It's a massive undertaking.
It is a profound set of chapters to tackle. And I mean, to do this justice, we have to completely abandon a superficial reading. The historical and linguistic context we're working with here, it reveals this metaphorical architecture that basically challenges everything about how we perceive time, consequence, and our own internal motivations.
Right, because it's not just ancient history. We're going to connect the incredibly specific historical reality of 7th century Mecca directly to the universal psychological truths that govern our modern lives today.
Because the ancient audience and the modern reader, they're really not as different as we might like to think.
No, they're not. And I think we have to start right there with the audience, because the tension in these early Meccan revelations is just, it's palpable.
Oh, absolutely. The text isn't speaking to, like, a group of devoted monks seeking enlightenment.
Right. According to historical scholars, the primary audience was fiercely, almost violently skeptical. Chapter 50 opens by explicitly quoting their mockery. The audience is literally saying, what? When we are dead and have become dust? Yeah. That is a far from probable return.
Yeah, they're openly laughing at the author. They view the entire concept of a reality beyond the physical here and now as utterly ridiculous.
And that historical context is really the skeleton key for understanding this entire section, isn't it?
It really is. You have to look at the socioeconomic reality of Meccan society at that time. I mean, this was a thriving, intensely mercantile, fundamentally materialist culture.
Like incredibly focused on wealth.
Exactly. Their entire worldview was predicated on trade routes, tribal leverage, wealth accumulation, and just immediate physical dominance.
So the concept of a resurrection of an afterlife where power and wealth suddenly meant nothing, that wasn't just, philosophically irritating to them.
No, it was a direct threat to their entire social hierarchy. So when the text introduces these massive concepts like the Great Event in chapter 56 or the Hour, it is not introducing some futuristic Hollywood-style apocalypse.
Right.
It's introducing the inescapable moment of absolute truth and consequence.
I have to stop you there, though, because I think it's very easy for modern readers to look back at these Meccan merchants and just judge them for their materialism, Like, oh, look at those greedy ancient people.
Oh, for sure. We love to take the moral high ground.
Right. But if we're being completely honest, isn't that intense focus on the present moment just basic human survival? I mean, if you're navigating a harsh environment, or in our case today, if you're navigating a volatile economy, inflation, a demanding career, it is incredibly natural to resist something you can't actually see.
Yeah, that's a really fair point.
Trying to convince a fiercely ambitious merchant to care about eternity, it's like pitching a 500-year business plan to a day trader. Like, how do you expect someone to care about cosmic accountability when they're just trying to keep their business afloat by Tuesday?
Yeah.
It feels like the text is demanding an impossible level of foresight.
And that tension you're identifying, that is exactly why this text remains so agonizingly relevant. I mean, we might not be trading caravans across the Arabian Peninsula, but our modern condition is entirely defined by extreme short-termism.
Oh, absolutely.
The Meccan merchants, they were obsessed with the next quarter's profits. Modern society is obsessed with the next quarter's earnings report. We see this short-termism deeply embedded in our politics, which honestly rarely looks past the next election cycle.
Never.
And we see it in how we interact with the environment, right? We're consuming resources with zero regard for the generations that are going to inherit the earth a century from now.
Yeah, and we see it in our own personal lives, too. I mean, the dopamine hit of a social media notification today completely overrides our long-term goals for mental health.
Precisely. And this is where the commentary we're looking at highlights a really fascinating detail. The historical notes suggest that when the text speaks of the hour, or the doom, it isn't strictly waiting for the afterlife.
Wait, really? So it's something happening in the present?
Yes. It argues that the hardship, the anxiety, the social decay faced by these opponents in their current lives, that is actually a foretaste of the spiritual reality after death.
Oh.
It's proposing that the consequences of our actions are inescapable, and they begin the exact moment we make a choice, extending infinitely outward. The text is forcefully imposing a long-term cosmic timeline onto a culture, and frankly, onto a modern reader that only wants to focus on immediate gratification.
It's asking a pretty devastating question then. Like, how would your behavior today change if you truly believed that every single action, every minor compromise echoed into eternity with zero escape clause?
Exactly. It's a staggering paradigm shift.
It really is. But what fascinates me is the methodology the text uses to prove this point. Because when faced with this intense, mocking skepticism from the merchants, the text doesn't respond with, like, a dense, abstract philosophical treatise.
No, it doesn't at all.
It doesn't use Aristotelian logic to prove the existence of the soul. Instead, it literally just points out the window. It pivots instantly from human stubbornness to the natural world.
And the seamlessness of that transition is one of the true hallmarks of these chapters. In chapter 50, verses 6 through 11, the text simply asks the skeptics to look up. It says, "Do they not then look up to heaven above them, how we have made it and adorned it and has no gaps?"
Right.
It points to the earth, the mountains, the beautiful kinds of growth, and most significantly, it zeroes in on the water cycle. It points to the rain sent down from the clouds that brings life to a dead land.
And it caps off that specific imagery by saying, "Thus is the rising," meaning this biological process you watch every single year. That is exactly what resurrection is.
Yes. The text is building an argument based purely on observable phenomena. It's basically challenging the skeptic.
Right.
If the ultimate reality of the universe can take a barren, cracked, desolate desert, which is an environment the Arabs understood better than anyone,
Oh, definitely.
and cause it to violently erupt into vibrant, pulsing life simply by introducing water, why is the regeneration of a human consciousness so impossible for you to grasp?
It's basically saying you accept this daily miracle, so why reject the other one?
Exactly. If you accept the daily miracle of the water cycle, on what logical grounds do you reject the miracle of human consequence? Furthermore, in chapter 51, which is titled The Scatterers, the text actually uses the natural elements as a binding oath. It speaks of the wind scattering dust, the clouds bearing heavy loads, the winds dividing the showers.
I always found that section deeply poetic, but linguistically, it's doing something much heavier than just describing the weather, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The linguistic context of the original Arabic reveals that this isn't just meteorological observation. It's a profound metaphor for the mechanics of truth.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
So just as the powerful winds break up the hard earth and scatter the dust to prepare the soil for rain, certain historical and spiritual forces operate to prepare human society for truth. The physical laws of nature are presented as manifest, undeniable evidence of a deliberate, highly structured moral reality.
Wow. So nature is not just a background element. It is the primary witness.
Yes, exactly.
That completely shifts the observer's relationship with the environment. I mean, if we apply that to you, the listener, today, we need to reframe how we walk through the world. Think of nature not as a scenic backdrop for your weekend hike, and certainly not just as a repository of raw materials to be extracted for industry.
Right.
The text is urging us to view the natural world as a massive, dynamic, interactive tutorial on how the universe actually operates.
Yeah.
The physical laws are a mirror reflecting the spiritual laws.
A mirror reflecting spiritual laws. That is the core premise here. If you observe that nature operates on a strict, unbreakable pattern of cause and effect, where a seed of wheat inevitably produces wheat, where gravity is completely impartial, where rain inevitably alters the landscape, Then the text argues that human morality is bound by that exact same universal law.
You can't cheat the system.
No, you can't. You cannot plant a seed of corruption in your business or your relationships and expect to harvest peace. The universe simply doesn't work that way.
Which gives us a very concrete practice to implement. Let's call this the mindful observation. Here's how you can actually utilize this ancient wisdom today. The next time you step outside, whether you're looking at a massive thunderstorm rolling in or just noticing a single weed forcing its way up through the concrete of a sidewalk, refuse to just label it weather or a plant.
Yes, look deeper.
Ask yourself, what spiritual mechanism is this physical process demonstrating? When you see the seasons shift from a freezing dead winter into an explosive spring, allow yourself to recognize that you are watching the universe's infinite capacity for regeneration.
And you know that practice requires us to actively dismantle our modern cynicism. I mean, if a dead, frozen branch can produce a blossom, what does that imply about a stalled career, a fractured relationship, or a deeply ingrained negative mindset?
That's a great point.
The natural world is constantly providing empirical evidence of renewal, yet we somehow remain convinced that our personal failures are permanent.
Yeah, we really do. And I think that brings us to the most intense and honestly, arguably the most uncomfortable portion of our exploration today. Because if the universe operates on this strict law of consequence, how is that consequence tracked? Like, who is keeping the ledger?
Right, the mechanics of it.
Yeah, we move into the heart of the message now, focusing on radical accountability and what the text describes as the inner watcher.
We have to look at chapter 50, verse 16 for this. It is one of the most striking physiological metaphors in the entire text. It says, "We know what his mind suggests to him, and we are nearer to him than his life vein." Many translations use the term jugular vein here, and this is immediately paired with a principle found in chapter 53. Man shall have nothing but what he strives for.
Nearer to him than his life vein. The jugular, the primary vessel carrying blood directly from the heart to the brain. From a biological standpoint, you literally cannot get closer to a human being than that without actually being them.
The psychological depth of this imagery is just staggering. The text is establishing a state of radical intimacy. It's utterly destroying the concept of a distant, detached deity sitting on a cloud, keeping score with a clipboard.
Right, the whole old man in the sky trope.
Exactly. It asserts that divine awareness is fundamentally interwoven into the very biological and psychological fabric of your existence. It knows what his mind suggests to him. It knows the quiet whispers of self-doubt, the complex rationalizations we build, the hidden envies we never vocalize, the silent judgments we pass on our neighbors.
That's all known.
All of it. And the text also introduces the concept of two receivers, sitting on the right and the left, recording every single word uttered.
See, to a modern ear, it sounds like the ultimate surveillance state. And for a reader living in an era of data tracking and privacy concerns, that can evoke a lot of anxiety. We already understand the concept of a permanent digital footprint.
Right, we're living it.
Yeah, we know that an email sent in anger or a thoughtless post can live on a server forever. We live with the low-grade fear of a 10-year-old mistake ruining our lives today. But the text is pointing to something infinitely more profound than an external server. It's pointing to an internal cosmic footprint.
That is the critical distinction. A digital footprint governs your external reputation, but the cosmic ledger governs your internal reality. And this concept culminates in chapter 50, verse 22, which describes the moment of death, or the moment of ultimate reckoning. It says, "Certainly you are heedless of it, but now we have removed from you your veil, so your sight today is sharp."
Your sight today is sharp. That literally gives me chills. Let's dig into that veil, because we wear veils every single day, don't we?
Oh, absolutely.
We wear the veil of our ego. We wear the veil of our curated public image. We wear the veil of our own self-deception. If I snap at a colleague during a meeting, I immediately pull down a veil and convince myself it was because I'm just passionate about the project or because I had a rough commute.
You justify it.
Right. I rarely admit the sharp truth.
Right.
I snapped because I'm struggling with a need for control or because I felt insecure about my own competence. We are absolute masters of rationalizing our worst behavior.
We build entire psychological fortresses out of those rationalizations. But this text posits an inevitable moment where that architecture completely collapses. The ability to rationalize is entirely stripped away. When your sight becomes sharp, you are forced to view your actions exactly as they are.
No filters.
None. Stripped of context, stripped of excuses, exactly as they echoed in the universal ledger. You see the true genesis of your choices.
But that concept of a universal ledger, That isn't isolated to this text, though, is it?
When
If you look across human history, this seems to be a foundational human intuition.
It's remarkably consistent across wisdom traditions. I mean, in Eastern philosophies, we see the concept of karma, the inescapable reality that every action, thought, and intention intrinsically carries its own energetic weight and generates an inevitable ripple effect.
Right.
There is no escaping the output of your choices. In this specific text, it is framed through the lens of divine accounting, but the underlying mechanics are identical. The universe is a closed moral system. Nothing is lost. Every action is a seed planted, and you will eventually have to eat the harvest it produces.
Which is simultaneously terrifying and incredibly empowering, because it means that every minor, seemingly insignificant choice actually matters. So how do we apply this in the chaos of our daily lives? We have a practice derived from this concept. Let's call it the unveiled decision.
Now, this is a demanding practice. It requires a level of brutal honesty that most of us actively avoid.
It really does. So the practice works like this. The next time you are about to make a difficult choice, or before you send a highly charged message, or even before you make a significant financial decision, you force a pause. You stop and ask yourself, if my internal rationalizations were stripped away right now, if a transcript of my true motives was printed out for my colleagues, my partner, or my children to read, how would this action look?
It completely bypasses the ego's defense mechanisms.
Exactly. Am I taking over this project to genuinely help the team, or because I desperately need to prove I'm the smartest person in the room? Am I buying this luxury item because it brings me genuine joy, or because I'm trying to soothe a deep-seated insecurity about my social status? If your sight were sharp right now, what would you actually see?
Facing that unvarnished truth requires immense courage. And, when we fail to do it, when individuals and entire societies stubbornly refuse to look in the mirror and insist on living behind the veil of their own delusions, the consequences are severe.
Yeah, they are.
Which leads us directly into the historical warnings provided in the text, which contain some of the most startling and graphic imagery in the entire Qur'an.
This is where we need to navigate the uncomfortable. Because if you're listening to this and feeling a bit tense about where the text is going, you aren't alone. As modern readers, we naturally push back against this kind of severe language. In chapters 51 and 54, the text goes into granular detail about the destruction of previous nations who rejected truth.
It's a very sobering list.
It lists the people of Noah, the ancient tribes of Ad and Samud, the brethren of Lot, and the empire of Pharaoh. It describes a destructive wind that reduced everything to ashes. It talks about bitter ill luck. And then in chapter 56, it outlines the fate of the guilty, whom it labels the companions of the left hand. It graphically states they will eat from the bitter zaqqum tree and drink boiling water.
Yeah, there is absolutely no softening the blow of that imagery. It is meant to shock the system.
And we have to acknowledge our modern bias here, right? We live in an era where we strongly prefer our spirituality to be therapeutic. We want ancient wisdom to be gentle, affirming, and focused on self-care and manifesting positive outcomes.
Of course we do.
We recoil from texts that speak of wrath, agonizing punishment, and societal annihilation. It feels vindictive or maybe primitive to a 21st century sensibility.
That reaction is entirely understandable. However, if we simply dismiss it as primitive, we miss the profound psychological and historical diagnosis the text is actually offering. We have to look at the historical commentaries to understand the dual nature of this punishment.
Okay, dual nature. How so?
First, there is a literal historical layer. The text was speaking into a real-time crisis of persecution. The Meccan leadership wasn't just, politely disagreeing with a new philosophy. They were actively oppressing, torturing, and driving out the early Muslim community.
Right.
Scholars point out that some of this severe language is a prophetic reference to impending historical events, like the Battle of Badr, where this entrenched, arrogant power structure would face a sudden, shocking collapse.
So it serves as a warning to the oppressor, like, you think your wealth makes you untouchable, but your empire will collapse just like Pharaoh's did.
Precisely. It is a historical reality check, but the much deeper and universally applicable layer is the spiritual one. Let's examine the metaphor of the zaqqum tree and the boiling water from chapter 56. The deepest layers of commentary suggest that we drastically misread this if we view it merely as physical torture in a subterranean hellscape.
So it's not literal fire and brimstone.
No, instead, these elements are physical manifestations of the inner distress, the paranoia, and the spiritual abasement of living a deeply corrupted life.
I want to spend some time on this because framing it as internal rot completely changes how we read the text. Think about the nature of a bitter tree. When a human being gives their life over entirely to greed, to manipulation, or to the ruthless suppression of others just to climb the corporate ladder, they are spiritually ingesting poison every single day.
Yes.
The text isn't describing a sadistic deity inventing cruel punishments. It's treating moral corruption with the gravity of a terminal disease.
That is a crucial distinction. It is not an arbitrary threat. It is an organic diagnosis.
Think about the modern equivalent. We all know, or at least we see in the media, public figures who have built massive empires on lies, exploitation, and stepping on the vulnerable. They might be sitting in a $50 million compound, completely insulated by wealth, but what is their actual internal state?
Exactly.
If you strip away the PR, their existence is usually characterized by intense paranoia, a profound inability to trust anyone around them, deep-seated bitterness, and a raging, unquenchable thirst for more validation that they can never, ever satisfy.
They are, in a very literal psychological sense, eating from a bitter tree and drinking boiling water in the present moment. The text is arguing that the afterlife or the ultimate reckoning is simply the full, unmasked realization of the spiritual state you actively cultivated on earth.
Wow.
If you cultivate bitterness and paranoia, you will eventually be consumed by them entirely. If you cultivate a raging fire of greed, you will ultimately exist entirely within that fire. The historical examples of Ad, Samud, and Pharaoh serve as a sobering audit of human hubris. Look at the mightiest, most technologically advanced and arrogant empires of the ancient world.
Where are they now?
Just ruins in the sand. Their insistence that they were above the laws of consequence was an illusion. The moral law of gravity pulled them down just as surely as it will pull down any modern system built on a foundation of injustice.
I love how that reframes the fear. Instead of reading these passages and feeling terrified of an angry God, the text challenges us to be terrified of our own capacity for corruption. It's demanding that we take our moral choices seriously, because the universe does not grade on a curve. Corruption destroys the host.
It does. But the brilliance of the narrative structure here is that it doesn't leave us stranded in the ashes of these destroyed civilizations. It doesn't just diagnose the disease. It offers a stunning, soaring counter-narrative of what human eminence can actually achieve when a person aligns completely with the truth.
And that pivot brings us to one of the most mystical, elevated sections of the entire Qur'an. In chapter 53, titled The Star, the text describes an extraordinary vision. It details a moment where the prophet attains the highest horizon, drawing near to the divine presence until he is the measure of 2 bows or closer still. It states that he sees the greatest signs at the farthest lot tree, which is known in the Arabic as the sidra.
The linguistic density of these verses is breathtaking. Let's look at the specific metaphors being utilized. First, the lot tree, or the sidra. In the brutal environment of the desert, a massive lot tree represented the ultimate boundary of safety. It was a place of absolute shade, rest, and sustenance.
Right.
But in this elevated spiritual context, the commentaries explain that the lot tree signifies the absolute limit of human knowledge and perception. It represents the ultimate boundary between human consciousness and the infinite divine reality. It is the furthest point a soul can travel.
The absolute edge of reality. But what about the phrase, the measure of 2 bows? That is such a hyper-specific physical image to use for a spiritual encounter.
That phrase unlocks the entire passage. It relies on an ancient Arab proverb. When 2 distinct tribes or 2 individuals wanted to forge a pact of absolute, unbreakable alliance, a union of total agreement and shared purpose, they would physically overlap their bows or shoot 2 arrows simultaneously from 1 bow. It was the physical symbol of the closest possible relationship. Therefore, this vision is not meant to be read merely as a physical journey through the stratosphere. It is a profound metaphor for the pinnacle of human spiritual achievement, a state of perfect alignment where the human will is in total, harmonious union with the divine truth.
It is a picture of the ultimate potential of the human spirit. But right after painting this incredible, transcendent picture of spiritual alignment, the text executes a hard, jarring pivot. It drops from the highest heavens straight into the dirt of Meccan society.
It really does.
It suddenly starts naming the local idols, Lat, Uzza, and Manat. And it relentlessly mocks them. It calls them merely names which you have named. Allah has not sent for them any authority. It dismisses the entire socio-religious structure of the city as pure conjecture.
That juxtaposition is entirely deliberate. The author is placing the absolute, undeniable reality of divine communion side by side with the hollow emptiness of society's manufactured obsessions. You have to understand that Lat, Uzza, and Manat weren't just religious statues. They were the foundation of the Meccan economy.
Right, they drove everything.
Yes, they dictated social status, they drove pilgrimage revenues, they justified tribal superiority. The Meccans gave these statues names, they ascribed immense power to them, they sacrificed their wealth to them, and the text unapologetically states, you made all of this up, you are bowing down to figments of your own collective imagination.
And this is where the ancient text slices right through our modern complacency. Because as listeners today, we might smile at the idea of worshiping a stone statue. We think we are far too advanced, rational, and scientifically literate for idolatry.
Oh, we definitely do.
But we are absolutely kidding ourselves. We've constructed a modern pantheon that is just as demanding and just as hollow.
Our idols have merely become conceptual rather than physical.
Exactly. We worship status, we worship wealth, we bow down to the algorithm, we sacrifice our mental health for public approval, we idolize youth and relentless productivity, we organize our entire lives, our self-worth, and our daily schedules around these concepts.
We give them everything.
We sacrifice our actual families and our physical health to appease them. And what this ancient text is doing is holding up a mirror and calling these modern obsessions exactly what they are: conjecture. They are just empty names we have collectively agreed to give power to. The stock market, a C-suite job title, the number of followers on a screen, these possess zero inherent universal authority. They only have the power we surrendered to them.
That is a staggering translation of the text's intent. It exposes the ongoing tragedy of the human condition. I mean, we possess the capacity to reach the farthest lote tree, to achieve profound peace, deep human connection, and moral eminence.
Right.
Yet, generation after generation, we actively choose to spend our brief lives groveling before empty concepts that we ourselves invented. We choose anxiety over truth.
Which gives us our next crucial practice. We call this the idol audit. I want you to take a hard, uncompromising look at your life this week. Ask yourself, what empty names am I currently allowing to dictate my self-worth? Is it your job title? Is it the balance in your investment account? Is it the validation of a specific social circle?
And identifying the idol is only the first step. The critical work is figuring out how to strip it of the authority you've granted it. How do you cognitively demote these concepts from ultimate reality to just a name society made up?
Yeah.
Because when you deeply internalize that a social media metric or a corporate hierarchy has absolutely no actual jurisdiction over your soul, it instantly loses its capacity to generate anxiety.
And that leads perfectly into our final major theme. Because once you stop obsessing over the fake rules of these societal idols, you can finally begin to perceive the actual structural reality of the universe. You can understand how you are meant to fit into it. Let's look at the synthesis of all these ideas in Chapter 55 and Chapter 56.
Chapter 55 is titled The Beneficent, or Ar-Rahman. It introduces perhaps the most vital philosophical concept of the entire section, the balance, or the Mizan. Verse 7 states, "And the heaven he raised it high, and he made the measure, that you may not be inordinate in respect of the measure." And verse 9 reinforces it, "And keep up the balance with equity, and do not make the measure deficient."
The balance, the Mizan, it sounds like an ecological imperative just as much as a spiritual one.
It is inherently both. The linguistic and historical commentary emphasizes that the Mizan is not restricted to the physical gravity that keeps planets in orbit, although it encompasses that. The balance represents equity, justice, and absolute harmony in human society and within the individual soul.
Oh, okay.
The text is asserting that the universe operates on a delicate, perfectly calibrated equilibrium. Therefore, when we act with injustice, when we exploit the vulnerable, when we hoard resources, or even when we abuse our own physical bodies through overwork or toxic habits, we are not just breaking a religious rule. We are actively violating the Mizan. We are throwing the cosmic scale out of balance.
And that violation is what causes the societal decay we see around us. Chapter 55 reinforces this point with a famous rhythmic refrain that repeats over and over. Which then of the bounties of your Lord will you reject? It hits like a drumbeat throughout the chapter.
It is a masterful rhetorical device. The chapter systematically lists the sun, the moon, the complex orbits of the stars, the trees, the vast seas, the pearls, the ships sailing like mountains, presenting all of it as irrefutable evidence of a beneficent creator who has provided an abundant, meticulously balanced habitat for humanity.
Right.
And after each piece of evidence, it asks that question. It is challenging our arrogance. How can you live inside this perfectly designed ecosystem, extract benefit from it every single second of your existence, and still have the audacity to reject the authority of the designer?
It's the ultimate reality check. And this leads right into the final reckoning described in Chapter 56, the Great Event. The text details the ultimate consequences of how we interact with this balance, and it divides all of humanity into three distinct classes.
Yes. It outlines the foremost, the companions of the right hand, and the companions of the left hand.
The clarity of this structure is brilliant. Let's map this onto how people engage with life, work, and morality today. Think about any major organization, community, or movement. You always have three distinct groups. First, you have the people who are actively destructive, cutting corners, spreading toxicity, exploiting others, and making the environment worse for everyone. That is the left hand. Then you have the vast majority, the companions of the right. These are the people who do the bare minimum, who generally follow the rules, who are decent but aren't exactly pushing the boundaries of moral courage. But then you have the foremost, the pioneers. These are the individuals who proactively seek truth, who willingly sacrifice their own comfort to ensure justice, who are deeply spiritually engaged in maintaining the Mizan in an unbalanced world.
That is a very accurate modern mapping of the text's intent, and naturally the text reserves its highest praise and its most profound promises of peace for the foremost. They are described as being drawn incredibly near to the divine presence in gardens of bliss.
Now, I have to pause here, because we absolutely need to talk about those gardens of bliss. This is an area where modern readers, and frankly a lot of Western commentators, get hopelessly tangled up in cultural stereotypes.
Oh, without a doubt.
The text talks about reclining on thrones, rivers flowing, abundant fruits, and it mentions the her, which is often translated into English as virgins or pure companions. It talks about hidden pearls. It is so easy for a modern listener to read this and think, wait, is this ancient vision of paradise just a physical, worldly indulgence? Is it just endless buffets and beautiful people?
I am very glad you brought this up, because this is where precise linguistic discernment is absolutely vital. If we consult the deep scholarly commentary on these verses, the expert consensus is incredibly clear. These descriptions are profound metaphors for a spiritual state of absolute peace and union, not a literal promise of physical worldly indulgence.
Let's dismantle the stereotype then. Let's look at the actual Arabic word her. What does it actually mean in its original context?
The word her literally signifies intense whiteness and purity. In classical Arabic poetry, it was specifically applied to the eyes to denote a pure, clear intellect and a sincere, untainted companion.
Okay.
The historical commentaries explicitly state that the text is not speaking of physical conjugal relations being maintained in the life to come. It repeatedly emphasizes that the blessings of paradise are fundamentally different from the things of this life. The term her, or pure companions, signifies purity of character, unsullied good deeds, and the beautiful manifested results of a righteous life.
So it's the manifestation of your own spiritual purities surrounding you.
Exactly. And crucially, the commentaries clarify that these blessings and this imagery apply equally to both men and women. The imagery of youth, purity, and beauty stands as a symbol for a spiritual life that manifests in absolute love and perfection.
That reframing changes everything. When the text says the righteous will be surrounded by these pure companions, it's not promising a harem. It's utilizing the most beautiful, pristine concepts that a 7th century Arab mind could possibly grasp to describe the indescribable joy of being surrounded by the pure reality of your own good deeds and existing in the presence of completely perfected, peaceful souls.
That is the essence of it. And we know this because the ultimate defining characteristic of this paradise is found in verse 26 of chapter 56. It explicitly states that in this garden you will hear no vain, useless, or sinful discourse except the word peace. Peace.
Peace. A total absence of anxiety, a total absence of internal conflict, ego, and competition. Total, unbreakable alignment with the Mizan.
That is the highest possible reward, the complete cessation of internal and external war, the final destination of the foremost.
Which is exactly what every human being, regardless of their background, is ultimately searching for. And this brings our exploration full circle. We have moved from the mocking skepticism of the mercantile Meccans to the undeniable evidence written into the water cycle to the radical, terrifying intimacy of the life vein.
Yes.
We've looked at the terminal disease of corruption, the heights of human potential at the lote tree, and finally the cosmic balance and the ultimate peace promised to the foremost.
It is a breathtaking piece of philosophical architecture. It challenges the reader to completely rebuild their understanding of consequence.
It truly does. And as we close out our time together today, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought. It's drawn directly from the closing verses of chapter 56, verses 58 through 74. After all the cosmic imagery and talk of the afterlife, the text grounds us with something incredibly humbling. It asks us to look at four painfully basic things.
The elements of life.
Exactly. It asks us to consider the life germ we emit to create a child. It asks us to look at the seeds we sow in the dirt. It asks us to consider the water we drink from the clouds. And finally, the fire we strike from the tree to keep warm.
The absolute fundamentals of biological human existence: reproduction, food, water, and energy.
Exactly. And the text asks a simple, devastating question about each one. Did you create it, or are we the creators? Did you design the biology of a seed? Did you invent the chemical properties of water? No, you did not create the fundamentals of your own existence.
We're just borrowing.
There are merely guests in this universe. We are utilizing raw materials that were freely given to us by a beneficent host. So here's the thought I want you to mull over today. If you didn't create the raw materials of your life, if you cannot even mandate a single drop of rain or force a single blade of grass to sprout, how much of your daily grinding anxiety comes from pretending you are in absolute control?
That is the ultimate realization. We suffer immensely because we insist on believing we are the architects of the universe when we are merely its inhabitants.
Let go of the illusion of total control. Honor the balance. Strive to be among the foremost. That's the heart of this section. This is Wisdom for the Present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.